Hello guys, this is me, Courtney. I'm doing my movie book talk on Tunnels by Roger Gordon and Brian Williams. It's an interesting book, kind of trippy. I have to say, it'll take you in a odd direction. And a quote they have in the book that starts it out, it's at the front of the book, the entire front. Everything unknown is doubted by an anonymous source. Now, that may sound kind of sage-ish or quite wise, but in regards to this book, it's absolutely true. Let's see. In the beginning of this book, it starts out with a kid named Willie Burroughs and his friend and his dad, Dr. Burroughs. They both are digging fanatics, you could say. They like to find things, archaeological stuff, old or not that old. Will is kind of the lonely outcast of a kid. His only other friend is another fellow outcast who happens to be a pretty big kid named Chester. He's not so much a digging fanatic, but he likes finding things, and he gets recruited by Will to dig potential archaeological sites. So as they're doing this, one day they discover a you could say air shaft, like in a subway. Just it's more like a crypt, and it doesn't go all the way to the surface. And they don't know what it is. They find it, and then they leave it, and then afterwards they come back to the hole, and the entire thing is filled in, and lots of the tunnel which they have been digging beforehand have been filled in. So they're really weirded out, and it kind of scares them a little bit. Will's dad happens to notice some, you could say, sketchy people. They're not really sketchy as much as they're not normal. They have a smell about them if you pass them that's musty and earthy, and probably due to lack of sunlight. And so he spies on them, and eventually he follows them underground. Imagine that. And so Will, after his dad has disappeared underground, follows in his dad's footsteps with Chester behind him, and this just digs a hole into the ground in order to find his dad. Everyone on top of the soil, where Chester is Will beforehand, are thinking his dad just got up and disappeared like a disgruntled husband after he had a dispute with his wife, Mrs. Burroughs. But everyone else who actually knows something thinks that something is up. For like Will's sister, who happens to be a very big very big fan of the song "You're My Sunshine," which happens to be a southern song. It's after you read this book, you'll have different thoughts about the song itself. The book itself is set in Highfield, London. It's a suburban development of London. It's part of the major city. It's just one of the outlying areas. And the book starts out after Will and Dr. Burroughs happen to have been able to dig through and dig into an old abandoned subway tunnel, which they happen to have found others of, interestingly enough, and they are into treasure hunting, it seems. the, the As I was saying earlier about Dr. Burroughs finding or noticing people who technically didn't belong above ground, after Will and Chester dig underneath the ground, they get captured by these people. And they learn that, hey, Dr. Burroughs had been there and that he'd already gone further on, saying, hey, yeah, my son will probably be right behind me. And that the people below the ground have been waiting for them. Turns out, Will happens to be one of them. Interesting side development. It explains his complexion. He happens to be an albino and has white hair, really white skin, and he's pretty much a really white ginger. He burns real easy. So he learns he's from a major family and happens to have a brother. So kind of freaks him out. And then later he also learns that his adopted topsoil sister, Rebecca, is actually a spy for a rather freaky group of underground people called the Styx. STYX. If you want to get an idea of what they might be, just imagine Area 51 Gestapo, or Area 51 Nazi Germany police force, SS police force. They're a really militarized, really super duper fighting squad who are trying to push topsoilers basically close towards extinction and eradication, so that they can claim the land and be the main dominating force. They're trying to practice world domination. It's a classic theme, but where it's coming from and how they would do it isn't what you would classically have. They're not trying to take over by force initially. They're trying to take over after the world has been subdued by sickness and after a plague and such. And they're just preparing for a disease of their own making to wipe out topsoilers. And so after they've let a disease flourish, once it's done, or the timeline of the disease's life is over, the virus's life is over, they'll come up and just clean up from the leftovers of whoever's alive in civilization at the time. It's pretty interesting, this story, how it goes. While I was reading it, it uses historical facts. wonderfully uses actual historic facts as part of the book storyline, and it's a beautiful work of storytelling. It aggravated me, the storyline itself, because of things that you would think of from our perspective, and the author thought of, well, no, things would be different because of this down underneath the soil. And so there are so many twists and turns and backtracks and literature, literal acrobatics in this book that were quite interesting. It's a good book. I couldn't stop reading the book when I first got it, and so I kept on reading about 4 other books afterwards. 4 other books of a 6-book series. They're pretty darn interesting. So if you get the chance, do take a look. Tunnels by Roderick Gordon and Brian